Giannis Antetokounmpo has earned more than $200 million, enough to buy almost anything he wants. Yet he still lives in a way that surprises people, choosing simplicity over luxury. So why does one of the NBA's richest stars refuse to live like one? Let me break it down. Here's the number first. Across his career, Giannis Antetokounmpo has made a whopping $338,006,542 in career earnings through major contracts. That's not counting endorsements. Add those in Nike, a shoe line, a handful of other partners, and you're looking at a fortune that puts him among the wealthiest athletes on the planet. His current net worth, depending on which financial outlet you trust, sits anywhere between $70 million and well over $200 million, once business holdings are factored in. And yet, Shannon Sharpe, the former NFL tight end turned broadcaster, went viral for comparing Giannis to something you'd find sitting in a used car lot. On his podcast, Sharpe painted a picture of a guy nobody wants to keep driving hard, because the more you drive it, the more chances somebody runs into you, decreasing the value of it. Sharpe was talking trade value, not spending habits. But the metaphor landed somewhere else too. Because if you actually look at how Giannis treats money, the old car comparison isn't an insult. It's basically his whole personality. Start with the actual car. Early in his career, while stars around the league were rolling up to arenas in six-figure exotic rides, Giannis was famously seen driving a reliable, no-frills GMC Yukon, a testament to his grounded nature even as his stardom began to soar. Not a Lamborghini, not a Bentley, an SUV you'd see in any Milwaukee parking lot. Even years later, once the MVPs and the championship ring showed up, his upgrades stayed modest. His taste in luxury vehicles still reflects a measured sophistication rather than ostentation, with a Porsche 911 Targa 4S standing out as one highlight. No fleet, no 15-car garage, one or two nice cars, driven by a guy who could own an entire dealership. Then there's the Oreo story, which by now might be the single most quoted anecdote about him. When Giannis finally started making real money in the league, he didn't blow it on jewelry or watches. He bought cookies. When he came to the league, that was the first thing he ate because he used to crave them and could never afford them. While other guys were spending money on cars and chains, he bought Oreos and ate them for a month straight until he got sick of them. Say that sentence out loud. A man with a 9-figure contract's first real purchase was a box of cookies he couldn't afford as a kid. That's not a marketing line. That's a guy who remembers being hungry. It shows up in how he talks about food, period. He's described stretches where meals simply didn't happen, and even once he had money for it, old habits stuck. He said that when his agent would get him proper meals early in his career, he'd only eat a quarter of the plate because he had the habit of leaving the rest for his brothers since he was a child. He was in the NBA, he had a paycheck, and he was still portioning food like there might not be enough to go around. His homes tell a similar story, just at a bigger scale. Giannis isn't sleeping in a one-bedroom apartment. He owns property. But even there, the pattern holds. Buy solid, buy useful, don't chase flash for flash's sake. He picked up a mansion in River Hills, Wisconsin. And here's the detail that matters. He bought that $1.8 million house from a former Bucks teammate, who'd originally purchased it for $1.6 million. Not some outlandish bidding war for a trophy property. A nice house, bought sensibly from a guy he used to play with. That's the whole transaction. Even his watch game, which you'd think would be the one place a superstar goes all out, gets framed by Giannis himself as connected to where he came from, not disconnected from it. When he signed on with a Swiss luxury watchmaker, he didn't post about flexing. He posted, plainly, that he used to sell watches and now he has a few of his own. Same object, completely different relationship to it. He's not collecting watches to prove he made it. He's collecting them because he remembers hawking knockoffs on a sidewalk to strangers who barely looked at him. That's the shape of this story. $200 million, give or take, sitting next to Oreos, a Yukon, and a house bought from a former teammate at a fair price. Most people who reach this level of wealth start living like it immediately. Bigger houses, bigger cars, bigger everything, as fast as the money allows. Giannis has had over a decade to do that. He hasn't, which raises the obvious question, why not? Why would someone who could own literally anything choose again and again to live like someone who still isn't sure the money's going to last? The answer isn't a personality quirk. It's not some vague he's just humble explanation you hear thrown around in post-game interviews. It's a direct line back to a specific childhood, in a specific city, where the difference between a good day and a bad day was whether there was food in the house that night. To understand why Giannis spends the way he does, you have to go back to Athens, to a family that wasn't even legally allowed to exist there on paper, and to two brothers standing on a sidewalk trying to sell sunglasses to tourists who didn't want to be bothered. Before there was a Greek freak, before there was a number 34 jersey selling out arenas, there was a kid named Giannis Antetokounmpo, born in the Sepolia neighborhood of Athens, to two Nigerian immigrants who had no legal right to be there. His father, Charles, and his mother, Veronica, had come to Greece looking for a better life. Instead, the Greek government never granted them citizenship, and their children were stateless, unable to own property, attend public school, or travel freely. Think about what that actually means day to day. Not an abstract legal status, a real family, in a real apartment, where the parents couldn't get formal jobs because they didn't officially exist in the country's system. Giannis's mother, Veronica, worked as a babysitter, while his father, Charles, worked as a handyman. Informal work, cash in hand, nothing steady, nothing guaranteed. There was no safety net under any of it. If the work dried up one week, the money dried up with it. So the kids worked too. Giannis wasn't 12 or 13 when this started. He said flatly that he used to sell things since he could remember himself, since he was 6 or 7 years old. 6 or 7, an age where most kids are worrying about homework and cartoons. Giannis was already out on the street trying to move product. He and his older brother Thanasis contributed to the family's meager income by selling bags and sunglasses on the city streets, and the inventory expanded over the years. Watches, CDs, DVDs, whatever they could get their hands on and flip for a few euros. He's talked about this specific stretch of his childhood more than once, and the details never really change, which tells you how deep it's carved in. He was always out of the house trying to help his mom and dad by selling watches, glasses, CDs, DVDs, anything he could find. And he kept doing it until he turned 17 because he had to. He had no other choice. 17 years old. By that age, plenty of future NBA players are already getting D1 scholarship offers and national attention. Giannis was still hustling sunglasses to tourists in Syntagma Square, adjusting his pitch on the fly based on how much money he thought the person walking by actually had. And he was good at it. Genuinely good. Not just trying his best good. In one of the more widely aired interviews of his early career, on 60 Minutes, he told the story with a strange kind of pride. The pride of someone who turned a bad situation into a skill. He said he was the best salesman out there, and when the interviewer pushed on why, his answer wasn't charm or luck. It was refusal to quit. He never gave up, and being young and cute helped too. There's something almost unbearable about that line when you sit with it. A kid weaponizing his own childhood cuteness to close a sale because his family needed the money that badly. Food scarcity ran alongside all of it. This wasn't just we were tight on cash. There were literal stretches without meals. He's described the rhythm of a typical day back then in blunt terms. Sometimes he'd go to school with no breakfast, come back, and sometimes there'd be no food. Then he'd have to go to practice, and he wouldn't get his first meal of the day until he came back from practice at 11 at night. Read that sentence again, 11 o'clock at night. First meal. As a teenager who was also somehow training to become a professional athlete on top of it. The family's housing situation matched the food situation. They were packed into a cramped apartment in Sepolia, where the family often went days without full meals. 5 brothers, Francis, Thanasis, Giannis, Kostas, and Alex, squeezed into a space that small, all of them aware, even as kids, that the household budget had no cushion in it whatsoever. And underneath all of that financial pressure sat something even heavier, the fear of simply not being allowed to stay. Because they were undocumented, the family lived with what amounted to a permanent low hum of anxiety about deportation. In addition to financial difficulties, the family faced xenophobia and fear of deportation. It wasn't just will we eat this week? It was will we still be in this country next month? That kind of pressure doesn't just disappear once a paycheck shows up later in life. It rewires how a person relates to security, to stability, to money itself. The turning point came almost by accident. A local coach spotted Giannis and his brothers playing pickup ball, and that connection eventually led to Philathletikos, a second-division Greek club, and eventually to a grainy video of a skinny, stateless teenager doing things on a basketball court that made American scouts sit up, But even that opportunity almost collapsed under the same bureaucratic weight that had defined his entire childhood. When it came time for the NBA draft, his stateless status meant he couldn't travel, which threatened to derail his dreams entirely. It took the family finally receiving Greek citizenship papers, a matter of weeks before everything could have fallen apart, for the path to the NBA to even stay open. That's the machine that built the man buying discount cookies with an NBA paycheck. You don't spend 17 years wondering if there'll be food on the table. And then suddenly, once the money shows up, forget what scarcity felt like. The frugality isn't a performance, it's muscle memory. Every time Giannis chooses the practical car over the flashy one, or eats a modest meal instead of splurging, there's a 6-year-old on a sidewalk in Athens standing right behind that decision. But surviving that childhood took more than just Giannis's own grit. It took a family that refused to let any one member carry the weight alone. And once the money started coming in, that same family became the reason Giannis never let the fortune change who he was. To understand the simple life Giannis lives now, you have to understand the family that's still standing next to him in Milwaukee more than a decade later. The first thing Giannis did once real money started coming in wasn't buy himself something. It was bring his family over. Long before endorsement deals and supermax contracts, the plan in his head was always the same: get his parents and brothers to a country where they could actually build something legally without looking over their shoulder. That plan became reality, and it reshaped the entire Antetokounmpo story. 4 of his 5 brothers eventually played professional basketball, and 3 of them have suited up in the NBA. Thanasis, his older brother, went from selling sunglasses next to him on the Athens streets to sharing an NBA locker room with him, and was part of the roster during Milwaukee's championship run, known specifically for the kind of relentless bench energy that mirrored the same refusal to quit attitude Giannis learned as a kid hustling for sales. Alex, the youngest, eventually joined too, making history alongside his brothers. In 2025, the Bucks signed Alex to a 2-way contract, and it meant something that had never happened before in the league. 3 brothers all on the same NBA roster at the same time. That's not normal roster construction. That's a franchise bending its own logic to keep one player happy because it understood something essential about him. Family isn't a side detail for Giannis. It's the actual core of the operation. One report on the situation put it plainly: signing his brothers was a not-so-subtle effort from the Bucks to make Giannis as comfortable and happy as possible in Milwaukee, because family is extremely important to the Greek star. Giannis himself has said as much over and over, in almost identical language across different interviews and different years. Ask him what drives him, and the answer isn't championships or scoring titles. It's watching his brothers and parents smile. He's put it simply: it starts with his family. That's what drives him every day, just seeing them smiling. Then there's the man who isn't around to see any of it anymore, but whose presence still shapes every financial decision Giannis makes. His father, Charles, spent his life doing informal handyman work in Greece just to keep the family fed, then died suddenly of a heart attack in Milwaukee in 2017 at 54 years old. Giannis has talked about that loss in ways that cut straight through the wealth conversation entirely. On a national TV appearance built around his charity, he described how his father had nothing financially but never once acted like it because he had his family around him. Giannis put it directly, saying his dad had no money and was poor, but he came from Nigeria for a better life, and his children were his legacy, and that growing up, Giannis felt like his father was the richest man in the neighborhood because he had them. That idea that being rich has almost nothing to do with money isn't a talking point Giannis trots out for interviews. It's baked into how the family spends and gives. The Charles Antetokounmpo Family Foundation, named for his father, wasn't set up to manage Giannis's investments or protect his fortune. It exists to hand pieces of that fortune back out, supporting widows, refugees, young men and women, disaster victims, and the oppressed, with programs spanning Milwaukee, Athens, and Nigeria. Same 3 places that map his whole life story: where he lives now, where he grew up, and where his parents came from. His wife, Mariah Riddlespringer, fits the same pattern rather than clashing with it. A former Rice University volleyball player, she spent years quietly working Milwaukee community causes, rather than leaning into any kind of NBA wife spotlight, serving on the board of the Milwaukee Diaper Mission and focusing on maternal health initiatives around the city. Together, they run an annual diaper and fundraising drive that in one recent year alone pulled in over $180,000. and thousands of diaper donations for families who needed them. It's not a press event built for cameras. It's the same instinct Giannis grew up with. When you have more than enough, you don't sit on it. You pass it down the line to whoever's short. Even the family conflict that eventually surfaced around Giannis's future in Milwaukee circled back to this same core value. When tension started building between Giannis and the front office, multiple reports pointed to one recurring friction point: how the organization treated his brothers. Coaches reportedly felt like the front office kept bending over backward around the brothers to keep Giannis content, creating resentment inside the building even as it kept him satisfied. Whatever the politics of it, the underlying fact stayed constant. Giannis was never going to separate his own contentment from his family's well-being, no matter how many awkward roster decisions it forced the franchise to make. That's the second engine behind the simple life. It's not only that Giannis remembers what it felt like to have nothing, it's that he spent every dollar since making sure his family never has to feel that again. Before he even thinks about himself, the money didn't go toward more stuff. It went toward more people, more safety, more of the exact security that was missing from his childhood in Athens. But family wasn't the only place all that early hustle went. The same kid who learned to read a stranger's wallet on a sidewalk in Athens grew into a grown man who reads business opportunities the same way, carefully, practically, and almost always with an eye towards something useful rather than something flashy. And that instinct built him a business empire most fans never even hear about. Somewhere along the way, Giannis stopped being just an athlete cashing endorsement checks and became something closer to an actual investor. The kind of guy building a portfolio, not just collecting sponsorship logos. And the pattern from his childhood shows up here too. Even as the business empire scales into the hundreds of millions, the choices underneath it stay grounded in usefulness over flash. Start with the sheer scale of it. Beyond his playing contract, Giannis has built out holdings across real estate, media, sports ownership, and venture capital. He stepped into ownership stakes and partnership roles across a spread of ventures, a nutrition and wellness brand, a health tech startup, even a piece of Nashville's professional soccer club. None of these are vanity purchases. They're calculated bets on categories he actually uses or believes in: recovery, performance, hydration, health. Take his involvement with Ready, a sports nutrition and hydration company. He didn't just slap his name on a bottle for a check. By his own account, and by the accounts of people around him, he's a genuine daily user of the product for his own training, treating the endorsement more like a personal habit than a marketing exercise. Same story with a newer wellness brand he joined that had already delivered over 20 million servings across dozens of countries before he signed on. He picked something already working at scale, rather than chasing a flashy startup pitch that sounded exciting but unproven. Then there's the family business that ties directly back to where all of this started. Through a venture with his brothers called Ante, the Antetokounmpo family runs a retail brand, with a flagship store in central Athens and outposts at the Athens airport and in Milwaukee. It's built entirely around their own story, apparel and accessories designed around the family's identity and journey. Think about the symmetry there. A family that once sold sunglasses on Athens sidewalks to survive now runs a legitimate storefront in that same city, selling their own brand instead of knockoffs to tourists. Same hustle, completely different ownership structure. His real estate moves follow the identical logic. Buy solid, buy for the family, don't chase the biggest number on the listing sheet. Beyond the Wisconsin mansion picked up from a former teammate at a reasonable price, Giannis and Thanasis together purchased matching homes at a resort development in the Peloponnese region of Greece. Then, a couple years later, he acquired an apartment complex in the Psychiko suburb of Athens. And crucially, the property was intended to be shared among the extended Antetokounmpo family, including his mother and brothers. Not a trophy asset, a family home purchased at scale, meant to be used by the people who raised him rather than sit empty as a status symbol. Even his current contract situation reflects a version of this same practical mindset. Across his career, he's moved through a rookie deal, a $100 million extension, a supermax deal worth over $200 million, and most recently, a 3-year extension worth over $170 million. Each time, the number went up. But the way he's talked about those numbers has stayed remarkably consistent, never as a scoreboard against other players, always tied back to security for the people around him. That practical streak even extends to how he talks about brand building in general, which for most athletes is treated as an ego project. Giannis has been blunt about rejecting that approach entirely. He said outright that if you're going to do something, you have to do it for yourself and try to be authentic and original. And he specifically called out the trend of athletes chasing big brands off bad advice instead of staying real with themselves. That's not the language of a guy chasing status. That's a guy actively pushing back against the instinct to inflate his own image just because he technically has the money to do it. Here's the thing that makes all of this land differently than it would for almost any other athlete his level of famous. Giannis isn't performing simplicity for the cameras. There's no PR campaign built around humble billionaire. The GMC Yukon happened years before anyone was filming him for content. The Oreo story wasn't something a publicist fed reporters. It came out of Giannis just answering a question honestly. The apartment complex bought for extended family wasn't announced with a press release. It surfaced through property reporting in Greek outlets, almost as an afterthought. That consistency, private choices matching the public story, is usually the tell for whether someone's simplicity is real or manufactured. Athletes fake humility constantly. For sponsorship deals and public image, it's much harder to fake it in a real estate filing or in an offhand answer about what you ate for your first NBA paycheck. Giannis's money trail keeps pointing back to the same place. A kid who remembers being hungry, now making sure nobody in his orbit ever has to feel that again, without needing anyone to see him do it. Which brings the story to where things actually stand today. Because in the middle of 2026, everything about Giannis's situation with the only NBA franchise he's ever known changed. And it forced a version of this same question, on a much bigger stage, one more time. If a man builds his entire financial life around loyalty, family, and staying grounded to where he came from, what happens when the franchise that gave him all of it lets him go? For over a decade, Milwaukee was the one constant in Giannis's story. Drafted 15th overall in 2013, as an 18-year-old nobody scouts fully understood yet, he grew into the face of the franchise, delivered them a championship, and turned a small market team into a destination players wanted to join. Along the way, the Bucks organization learned exactly how to keep him, not through bigger contracts alone, but by understanding what actually mattered to him. That's why, when tension started building over the roster's direction, the front office's move wasn't a lavish gift or a new marketing campaign. It was signing his brothers, but even that wasn't enough in the end. Reports over the following months described a slow accumulation of friction. Frustration over playoff exits, disagreements about roster building, and lingering tension around how the organization handled his family's presence on the team. Eventually, the relationship reached a breaking point that had been rumored for years but never quite happened. Giannis Antetokounmpo was traded to the Miami Heat in a deal that sent Tyler Herro and future draft capital back to Milwaukee. For a guy whose entire identity had been built around loyalty and staying grounded in one place, that kind of departure could have looked like a betrayal of everything his story stood for. Instead, it revealed something clearer about what simple actually meant for him all along. It was never really about staying in one city forever, or refusing every dollar on principle, or performing modesty as some kind of brand. It was about control, keeping his life small enough and his relationships close enough that no amount of money or franchise politics could shake loose what actually mattered to him. That's why even mid-trade rumors, even with commentators comparing him to used cars on trade value, Giannis kept circling back to the same handful of things in interviews: family, consistency, staying present instead of chasing the past or the future. He said it in almost exactly those terms before, that dwelling on the past is ego, chasing the future is pride, and the only thing worth actually focusing on is the moment directly in front of him. That's not a mindset built for a max contract superstar chasing a bigger empire. That's the mindset of a kid who learned on a sidewalk in Athens that the only thing you can actually control is the next sale, the next practice, the next meal, not everything that might happen 5 years down the line. It's worth sitting with what the simple life actually cost him along the way, because it wasn't nothing. Turning down the instinct to spend like everyone around him meant absorbing years of jokes about his outdated SUV, while teammates rolled up in six-figure cars. It meant a childhood that ended at 17 instead of continuing on with any kind of normal adolescence because the family needed a full-time seller instead of a full-time kid. It meant carrying the psychological residue of statelessness and food scarcity into adulthood, long after the bank account said none of that should matter anymore. Simple living, for Giannis, was never the easy path. It was the harder one, resisting the very normal, very human urge to finally relax and spend once the money showed up. Because some part of him never fully believed the money was permanent. And maybe that's the real answer sitting underneath the $200 million. Giannis chooses the simple life not because he doesn't understand what wealth can buy, but because he understands exactly what it can't. It can't buy back a childhood where breakfast was optional. It can't replace a father who spent his whole life broke, but felt like the richest man in the neighborhood because his sons were there with him. It can't undo 11 years of statelessness or the terror of almost missing an NBA draft because a government hadn't decided yet whether his family counted as real citizens. What the fortune could do, and what Giannis has spent every year of his career actually doing with it, was buy back security for the people who mattered most to him. Brothers on the same roster, a mother with a home she never has to worry about losing, a foundation that quietly moves money toward widows and refugees who remind him of exactly where his own family started, a wife building her own quiet legacy in diaper drives instead of red carpets. None of that requires a mansion with 15 cars in the driveway. None of it requires performing wealth for anyone watching. So when people ask why a man worth over $200 million still drives something practical, still eats simply, still hands his contract fights, and franchise moves back to a family and legacy-shaped compass, instead of an ego-shaped one, the answer was never complicated. It's the same answer it's always been, going back to a 6-year-old on a sidewalk in Sepolia, learning that the only wealth that ever really counted was the people standing next to him. Everything since has just been Giannis making sure that never has to change, no matter how many zeros get added to the number attached to his name.